time is money.
Time is money.
Time is money.
Time is money, but what does that mean? In today's society, time is money refers to the phenomenon that when a person is not working, when they're not dedicated to their job, their occupation, they're losing out on money and opportunity for both themselves, but also their community as well as their firm.
Yeah. And I think that ideas kind of put more of an emphasis on efficiency over quality, and I think that reflects in Wendell Berry's essays when he chooses to use horses to farm instead of machines because he values the quality of his work over the ability to do more acreage.
I concur. And on a deeper note, Barry really talks about how putting efficiency over quality can lead to a loss of humanity within our work. And I find that that's a really interesting way to look at how pushing ourselves to create more output really just destroys the fabric of our society.
Mm-hmm. Taking from Severance, which we read in Lit, just like the idea that there'd be people during the fever that would rather stay and have the opportunity to possibly get a promotion when everything returns back to normal is indicative of the idea that like the society has moved to job over like life and common sense. Like most people wouldn't stay in the office, but these people were going and still competing even in the midst of a world-ending event.
It also connects to how in The Grasshopper, his idea of a utopia is where you do something for the sake of doing the act instead of the result. But in today's society, it's all about the result and not the process.
That probably ties back to Taylorism and his idea of scientific management and taking everything to a more efficient level over a more intrinsically valuable or more humane level, and not just in factories and things. I think that reflects in like outside jobs like doctors and things, especially in The Refusal to Work, the story about Larry, who's a social worker. Like his whole job is about social interaction, but it's kind of shifted to efficiency over that when he says that he's kind of taken more paperwork things when he really came in to make a social difference.
Yeah, I agree, and that's also interesting because it connects to like how humanity has almost lost some of the pride that they have in their work when they're emphasizing efficiency over quality. Because, for example, being a craftsman used to be something that was a part of one's identity. It took years and years and years to go through practice and through repetition to gain a profession. And that has kind of become a lost art. Like, we don't really identify the same way that we used to with our profession. Now, for example, my dad works in tech, and, like, he doesn't identify with, like, working in tech. It's just, like, an aspect of his everyday life. But, like, Paul Revere was known as being, like, a skilled silver worker. Mm-hmm. And that was, like, his identity. I just find that to be a lost art in a way.
Yeah.
Because people can't connect with their jobs in the way that they used to be able to.
Like, think IKEA. It's a giant furniture store where everything is kind of uniformly made, and that takes away some of the identity of each piece of furniture.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because now when we think about luxury goods in both the past and in the present, there's really been a big shift there. In the past, you think about how in the 19th century, when machinery was becoming such a big fabric of our society, getting something machine produced was super impressive. Like, it was something that you wanted to have because it was perfectly made, and having something handmade was going to be more expensive, and it wasn't going to look as nice. But when we look at modern day, having something handmade is seen as that much cooler, that much more impressive because it took that extra work. It took that artisan to really like refine his craft and then produce something that you can now have. Whereas having something machine made is like, oh, everyone has that. Mm-hmm. So it's not really that impressive.
Going back to your idea about the pride as a craftsman and crafts and basically just spending your whole life studying this one specific thing, being an apprentice, and then later becoming a master of something, of a craft, is of that being a lost art. It's like they used to value the time that you put to refine your skills in doing something. Now that we start to think that time is money, we think the time spent to refine something is kind of a waste, and we need to get results immediately now without the progress and the time spent on the progress, like getting to a specific point of your skill.
Taking another turn on pride, we've kind of lost a national pride of like a lot of what we make now has been exported to other countries to do because the labor is cheaper. So now it's like made in America is a promotional thing.
I don't know, if you look at really, really mass-produced things, it's usually produced in a specific country or like a region. And I feel like now it's gotten to a point where it has certain connotations.
I think the shift to cheaper work in other countries also, it's kind of put the idea that like we're responsible for our workplace conditions to the side, because if you think that it's being outsourced to another company, well, it's their responsibility. But the reality is if you're getting cheap labor from places like China or Vietnam, the workplace conditions really aren't great.
Yeah, and that's also super interesting because when you talk about something being made in America, it's always like, you know, the workers are well paid, you know that they're well fed, you know that their workplace conditions are sanitary. And that, I think, plays a lot into the pride aspect, because like you get something with a tag that says made in America and you just feel that much better because you know that the workers were treated better. Whereas if you get something made from a developing country, you can't say the same thing, which means that you almost feel like you're playing into that aspect. And as a consumer, you can't have that same pride in wearing or using the good.
In the film Machines, for example, the further you are from the actual product in the line of production, the less pride you have in the actual result. Because if your job is to only make sure the cloth doesn't get tangled in the machine, versus if you have some kind of control, or in the final product, like the old guy who was like mixing pigment, I think, he seemed to have much more pride in the actual results versus the guy who was just working with machines, making sure nothing is going wrong.
Yeah, I think just like the whole time is money, the way we're moving in society is pretty negative. Just think like the actor strike for one, and kind of the AI thing where it's like, well, if you have the AI or the image of the actor, then you don't need to spend the time or the money to get the actor booked.
I agree, and I think that also plays into the social interaction piece, especially where you think about like if something's machine made, like that same community of production doesn't necessarily exist. We talk a lot about mechanics, and like you go to get your car fixed, and you can have you can have a really deep connection with your mechanic where there's trust there, and I think that also plays into like a happiness / mental health aspect, where it's like if you're having that community, you can gain fulfillment from your work. But whereas with manufacturing, you're almost losing out on the whole enjoyment, fulfillment of seeing someone use your product, wear your product, and almost the whole point of your production can be diminished.
I think that the idea that time is money overall, it affects our society negatively, because we talked about how it leads to the loss of humanity, and we think more about the efficiency versus quality, and we've kind of lost pride in our work in general.
News from nowhere, Morris said, "Nature will not be fully conquered till our work becomes a part of the pleasure of our life." And I'm not sure, I think that goes pretty far. I don't think work can always be the utmost enjoyment in our life, but I do feel that both through a social aspect as well as with our pride, I think work deserves to have more more fulfillment in our daily lives.